Hi, folks. It's a fantastic Friday, and we're going to talk about the sun standing still at Joshua's command. It's one of those strange verses or collection of verses in the Bible that just doesn't make any sense to us because we've never seen the sun stand still or stop moving, and yet we know that the sun doesn't move. It's the earth that moves. But Joshua is speaking in a language of appearance. Just like when we say the sun rises in the morning and sets in the evening. We know better than that. We know the sun doesn't rise in the east and set in the west, but it is the language of appearance because it appears to rise in the east and set in the evening in the west. So I tell you what we're going to do. I want to read the scripture to you. You can find it in the Hebrew Testament, the Old Testament, in the book of Joshua, chapter 10, verses 12, 13, and part of 14. Let me just read it. Then spoke Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the men of Israel. And he said in the sight of all Israel, Sun, stand thou still at Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the nation took vengeance upon their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jasher, the sun stayed in the midst of the heaven, and thou did not hasten to go down for about a whole day? There has never been to this day anything like it since. Now, that's the scripture that we're dealing with, and we're going to look at that. We're going to take a break. I want you to think about it. You can go to Joshua chapter 10 and look at verse 12, 13, and 14, and you can read it for yourself in whatever translation of the Bible that you have. Then we're going to look at why the sun stopped. Did it stop? What does it mean? And how do we understand this? Before you hear this following video, I want you to realize that Scripture doesn't always mean what it says. It means what it means. Like my grandmother, when I would get up from the table eating noon lunch when I was in elementary school and left half of it on my plate, she says, your eyes were bigger than your stomach. That's exactly what she said, but it didn't mean what it said. It meant what it meant. So let's take a break and experience the video following, and I will be back to share with you a little bit more of Fantastic Friday.
God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth.
Welcome back. So, Why did God stop the sun for Joshua? What Joshua was asking is Joshua was asking for some more daylight in order for him to fight his enemies. This is when they were coming into the land of Canaan and conquering that land. Joshua was running out of daylight for his army to fight, and he was asking the Lord that there may be a longer day. In other words, that the sun stop where it was from its moving, that the sun stop and give him some more daylight. And it says the sun stopped for about a whole day. That word about is not always in the translations, but in the Revised Standard and the King James, it is. So what Joshua was saying, he wanted his army to fight on so that he could experience a victory over these 5 kings that he was fighting and these armies that he was fighting. Joshua had promised to protect the Gibeonites, and so he led this army and defeated these 5 kings. And Joshua prayed that God would help the Israelites in their battle by stopping the sun. Now, modern English translations which follow the King James translation, the King James in 1611, we've discovered a lot since 1611 about the scripture through archaeological digs and finds. Usually interpret this text to mean that the sun and the moon stopped moving. However, we know that the sun and the moon does not stop moving. However, Joshua wasn't about to say, God, let the earth stand still, because in appearance, the language of appearance, it's the sun and the moon that moves, not the earth. So the interpretation is supported by the fact that the Hebrew word stand still in the Babylonian text can also imply an eclipse. Now, that's just about as deep as we're going to get. Christianity Today, and I've forgotten, I tried to look it up and couldn't find it. I think it was around early 1970, wrote a big article on this, why the sun and how the sun actually stopped moving and continued to shine for a day. That's just the evangelical mind that does not want to say this scripture doesn't mean what it says, it means what it means. They just don't want to admit that. I'm not one of those. I can understand that the scripture is in a different age, a different time, pre-scientific. They didn't know that the sun was stationary and that the earth revolves around the sun. They didn't understand that. Researchers have developed a new eclipse code which takes into account the variations of the earth's rotation. And at Cambridge University, they came out with these calculations. They determined that the only annular eclipse visible from Canaan between 1500 BC and 1050 BC was on the 30th of October, 1207 BC in the afternoon. Now, I take that with an absolute grain of salt. Someone has suggested that this whole missing day in the calendar, and there is a missing day of something like 23 hours and 40 minutes, is when the sun stood still and Joshua summoned the sun and the moon to stop their movement. But the computer indicated that the eclipse time in Joshua's was not a whole day. So you can take that Cambridge study for what it is. Here is the bottom line that I come up with. I don't ask you to share it. I just simply share with you that this is my interpretation. Joshua was asking God to assist him in this battle to save the Gibeonites. And God did. And Joshua interpreted it this way, that he found more daylight savings time? Well, maybe. He found more fight time to battle his enemies. That's what I think it means. Did the sun stand still? Well, yes, because the sun doesn't move. Was there an extra 24 hours of daylight? I don't think so. That's what it says, not what it means. Always look at Scripture for what it says and what it means, and make your determination how you understand it from that perspective. My friends, God bless you. Take care on this fantastic Friday. That's all there is. There's not a lot of great in-depth knowledge here. Look it up for yourself. Joshua chapter 10, verses 12, 13, and half of 14. Run the race. Finish well. God bless you.